I surveyed the scene with pride. I was the youngest one there. Even Curly, if he had been there, had turned 15, so he was older than me. I could tell Derry realized this too, and although he was proud, I also knew he was worried. Shoot, I thought, I'll fight so good this time he won't ever worry about me again. I'll show him that someone besides Soda Pop can use his head. One of the Brumley guys waved me over. We mostly stuck with our own outfits, so I was a little leery of going over to him, but I shrugged. He asked to borrow a weed, then lit up. "That big guy with y'all, you know him pretty well?" "I ought to, he's my brother," I said. I couldn't honestly say yes. I knew Derry as well as he knew me, and that isn't saying a whole lot. "No kiddin'? I got a feeling he's gonna be asked to start the fireworks around here. He a pretty good bopper?" He meant rumbler. Those Brumley boys have weird vocabularies. I doubt if half of them can read a newspaper or spell much more than their names, and it comes out in their speech. I mean, you take a guy that calls a rumble bop action, and you can tell he isn't real educated. "Yep," I said, "but why him?" He shrugged. "Why anybody else?" I looked our outfits over. Most greasers don't have real tough builds or anything. They're mostly lean and kind of panther-looking in a slouchy way. This is partly because they don't eat much and partly because they're slouchy. Derry looked like he could whip anyone there. I think most of the guys were nervous because of the no weapons rule. I didn't know about the Brumley boys, but I knew Shepherd's gang were used to fighting with anything they could get their hands on. Bicycle chains, blades, pop bottles, pieces of pipe, pool sticks, or sometimes even heaters. I mean guns. I have a kind of lousy vocabulary too, even if I am educated. Our gang never went in for weapons. We're just not that rough. The only weapons we ever used were knives, and shoot, we carried them mostly just for looks. Like Two-Bit with his black-handled switch. None of us had ever really hurt anybody, or wanted to. Just Johnny, and he hadn't wanted to. "Hey, Curtis," Tim yelled. I jumped. "Which one?" I heard Soda yell back. "The big one. Come on over here." The guy from Brumley looked at me. "What did I tell you?" I watched Derry going toward Tim and the leader of the Brumley boys. He shouldn't be here, I thought suddenly. I shouldn't be here, and Steve shouldn't be here, and Soda shouldn't be here, and Two-Bit shouldn't be here. We're greasers, but not hoods, and we don't belong with this bunch of future convicts. We could end up like them, I thought. We could, and the thought didn't help my headache. I went back to stand with Soda and Steve and Two-Bit then, because the Socias were arriving. Right on time. They came in 4 carloads and filed out silently. I counted 22 of them. There were 20 of us, so I figured the odds were as even as we could get them. Derry always liked to take on 2 at a time anyway. They looked like they were all cut from the same piece of cloth, clean-shaven with semi-beetle haircuts, wearing striped or checkered shirts with light red or tan-colored jackets or Madras ski jackets. They could just as easily have been going to the movies as to a rumble. That's why people don't ever think to blame the Socias and are always ready to jump on us. We look hoodie and they look decent. It could be just the other way around. Half of the hoods I know are pretty decent guys underneath all that grease, and from what I've heard, a lot of Socias are just cold-blooded mean, but people usually go by looks. They lined up silently, facing us, and we lined up facing them. I looked for Randy but didn't see him. I hoped he wasn't there. A guy with a Madras shirt stepped up. "Let's get the rules straight. Nothing but our fists, and the first to run lose, right?" Tim flipped away his beer can. "You savvy real good." There was an uneasy silence. Who was going to start it? Derry solved the problem. He stepped forward under the circle of light made by the street lamp. For a minute, everything looked unreal, like a scene out of a J.G. movie or something. Then Derry said, "I'll take on anyone." He stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, his muscles taut under his t-shirt and his eyes glittering like ice. For a second, it looked like there wasn't anyone brave enough to take him on. Then there was a slight stir in the faceless mob of Socs, and a husky blond guy stepped forward. He looked at Derry and said quietly, "Hello, Daryl." Something flickered behind Derry's eyes, and then they were ice again. "Hello, Paul." I heard Soda give a kind of squeak, and I realized that the blonde was Paul Holden. He had been the best halfback on Derry's football team at high school, and he and Derry used to buddy it around all the time. He must be a junior in college by now, I thought. He was looking at Derry with an expression I couldn't quite place, but disliked. Contempt? Pity? Hate? All three? Why? Because Derry was standing there representing all of us, and maybe Paul felt only contempt and pity and hate for greasers. Derry hadn't moved a muscle or changed expression, but you could see he hated Paul now. It wasn't only jealousy. Derry had a right to be jealous. He was ashamed to be on our side, ashamed to be seen with the Brumley boys, Shepherd's gang, maybe even us. Nobody realized it but me and Soda. It didn't matter to anyone but me and Soda. That's stupid, I thought swiftly. They both come here to fight, and they're supposed to be smarter than that. What difference does the side make? Then Paul said, "I'll take you," and something like a smile crossed Derry's face. I knew Derry had thought he could take Paul any time, but that was 2 or 3 years ago. What if Paul was better now? I swallowed. Neither one of my brothers had ever been beaten in a fight, but I wasn't exactly itching for someone to break their record. They moved in a circle under the light, counterclockwise, eyeing each other, sizing each other up, maybe remembering old faults and wondering if they were still there. The rest of us waited with mounting tension. I was reminded of Jack London's books. You know, where the wolf pack waits in silence for one of 2 members to go down in a fight. But it was different here. The moment either one swung a punch, the rumble would be on. The silence grew heavier, and I could hear the harsh, heavy breathing of the boys around me. Still, Derry and the Soc walked slowly in a circle. Even I could feel their hatred. They used to be buddies, I thought. They used to be friends, and now they hate each other, because one has to work for a living, and the other comes from the west side. They shouldn't hate each other. I don't hate the Socs anymore. They shouldn't hate. "Hold up," a familiar voice yelled. "Hold it." Derry turned to see who it was, and Paul swung, a hard right to the jaw that would have felled anyone but Derry. The rumble was on. Dallas Winston ran to join us. I couldn't find a Soc my size, so I took the next best size and jumped on him. Dallas was right beside me, already on top of someone. "I thought you were in the hospital," I yelled, as the Soc knocked me to the ground, and I rolled to avoid getting kicked. I was. Dally was having a hard time, because his left arm was still in bad shape. "I ain't now." "How?" I managed to ask, as the Soc I was fighting leaped on me, and we rolled near Dally. "Talk the nurse into it with 2-bit switch. Don't you know a rumble ain't a rumble unless I'm in it?" I couldn't answer because the Soc, who was heavier than I took him for, had me pinned and was slugging the sense out of me. I thought dizzily that he was going to knock some of my teeth loose or break my nose or something, and I knew I didn't have a chance. But Derry was keeping an eye out for me. He caught that guy by the shoulder and half lifted him up before knocking him 3 feet with a sledgehammer blow. I decided it would be fair for me to help Dally, since he could use only one arm. They were slugging it out, but Dallas was getting the worst of it, so I jumped on his Soci's back, pulling his hair and pounding him. He reached back and caught me by the neck, and threw me over his head to the ground. Tim Shepherd, who was fighting 2 at once, accidentally stepped on me, knocking my breath out. I was up again as soon as I got my wind, and jumped right back on the Soc, trying my best to strangle him. While he was prying my fingers loose, Dally knocked him backward, so that all 3 of us rolled on the ground, gasping, cussing, and punching. Somebody kicked me hard in the ribs, and I yelped in spite of myself. Some Soc had knocked out one of our bunch, and was kicking me as hard as he could. But I had both arms wrapped around the other Soci's neck, and I refused to let go. Dally was slugging him, and I hung on desperately, although that other Soc was kicking me, and you'd better believe it hurt. Finally, he kicked me in the head so hard it stunned me, and I lay limp, trying to clear my mind and keep from blacking out. I could hear the racket, but only dimly through the buzzing in my ears. Numerous bruises along my back and on my face were throbbing, but I felt detached from the pain, as if it wasn't really me feeling it. "They're running!" I heard a voice yell joyfully. "Look at the dirty blanks run!" It seemed to me that the voice belonged to Two-Bit, but I couldn't be sure. I tried to sit up and saw that the Socs were getting into their cars and leaving. Jim Shepard was swearing blue and green because his nose was broken again, and the leader of the Brumley boys was working over one of his own men because he had broken the rules and used a piece of pipe in the fighting. Steve lay doubled up and groaning about 10 feet from me. We found out later he had 3 broken ribs. Soda Pop was beside him, talking in a low, steady voice. I did a double take when I saw Two-Bit. Blood was streaming down one side of his face, and one hand was busted wide open, but he was grinning happily because the Socs were running. "We won," Derry announced in a tired voice. He was going to have a black eye, and there was a cut across his forehead. "We beat the Socs." Dally stood beside me quietly for a minute, trying to grasp the fact that we had really beaten the Socs. Then, grabbing my shirt, he hauled me to my feet. "Come on." He half-dragged me down the street. "We're going to see Johnny."